Beneath the scorching sun and endless skies of Nevada, where sand stretches farther than the eye can see and rocks rise like silent monuments, lie ghost villages abandoned long ago. By day, these desert ruins are quiet, their buildings sun-bleached and crumbling, their streets littered with the remnants of lives once lived. But by night, the villages change. Shadows stretch across empty alleys. The wind carries whispers of the past. And the ghosts of those who perished, of those who vanished without a trace, walk silently among the ruins. Visitors report hearing footsteps on sand and stone when no one else is there. Lanterns flicker in abandoned homes with no source of light. Figures appear in doorways, their eyes hollow, their faces pale. Some swear that the desert itself moves around them, guiding them deeper into the ghostly villages. Tonight, my dear friend, we will step into these haunted desert villages. We will wander through sunken streets, peek into abandoned cabins, and listen to whispers carried by the wind. We will uncover the most haunted desert ghost villages in Nevada, where every shadow holds a story, and the past refuses to rest. So tell me, if you were walking alone in a desert ghost village at midnight, and a pale figure appeared in a doorway, staring silently, would you approach to see who it is? Or would you retreat to safety before the shadows notice you? Hello, my dear friend. I am so glad you are here tonight, safe and warm, because the villages we are about to explore are not for the faint of heart. Nevada's desert is vast and unforgiving. Among its dunes and rocky outcrops lie ghost villages, abandoned by their residents decades or even centuries ago. Some were mining towns left when resources ran dry. Some were settlements abandoned after disease or disaster. Some were built and never truly inhabited, their skeletons standing as monuments to human ambition and nature's reclamation. Visitors have reported eerie occurrences. They hear footsteps echoing through empty streets. Figures in old clothing appear briefly, then vanish. Lanterns light on their own inside abandoned cabins. Some have felt cold hands brush their arms. Others have heard whispers, faint laughter, or distant cries, following them through the ruins. The desert at night is heavy, thick with heat and the memory of the past. Wind carries voices and shadows twist in ways that seem unnatural. Some have seen objects move on their own, doors opening and closing, or windows rattling as if someone is inside. Others claim the sand itself shifts beneath their feet, forming paths that lead deeper into the abandoned village. Before we walk these haunted desert villages together, my friend, I want to ask you something. And I hope you will answer it in the comments. If you were alone in a desert ghost village at midnight, and you heard your name whispered from an empty cabin, would you enter to see who is calling, or would you leave immediately, hoping the spirit allows you to go? Take a deep breath. Steady your heartbeat. And let us explore the most haunted desert ghost villages in Nevada. Black Rock Village rests in a shallow basin of dark stone and broken earth, far from active roads and modern noise. Once a thriving mining settlement, it now stands empty beneath an open sky, its buildings worn thin by time and wind. From a distance, the village appears frozen, as if paused mid-breath, waiting for something that never arrives. The road leading in is cracked and uneven, swallowed in places by encroaching rock and dust. Rusted rail tracks curve toward collapsed mine entrances, disappearing into shadow. Wooden structures lean at uncertain angles, their supports weakened but still standing. The air feels dry and heavy, carrying the faint scent of iron and old ash. Silence dominates Black Rock Village, yet it is not complete. Wind moves through broken windows and doorways, creating low tones that echo softly along the streets. Loose signs creak against their mounts. Shutters tap gently, opening and closing with no urgency. Every sound feels deliberate, amplified by the absence of life. Visitors often report the first sense of being watched before they notice anything unusual. It arrives as a subtle awareness, like eyes following movement from just beyond peripheral vision. Turning reveals empty streets, doorways filled only with shadow, and alleys choked with debris. Still, the feeling persists. As light shifts throughout the day, shapes begin to form along the cracked stone roads. Figures appear briefly at the ends of streets or near the remains of storefronts. They stand upright and still, human in outline but lacking detail. From a distance, they could be mistaken for miners returning from a shift, shoulders slightly hunched, posture familiar. These figures never approach. They remain where they are seen, fading when attention lingers too long. A second glance often reveals nothing but empty space and drifting dust. Cameras and recording equipment rarely capture more than vague distortions, smears of light where something seemed to stand moments earlier. Lanterns are another constant feature of Blackrock Village. Old metal frames hang from posts and hooks outside buildings, remnants from when the settlement relied on flame for light. Many are rusted shut, their glass clouded and cracked. Yet visitors have reported seeing lanterns sway gently, glowing faintly as if recently lit. The movement is slow and rhythmic, matching the wind but not always responding to it. At times, lanterns swing when the air is still. At other moments, nearby debris remains motionless while the lanterns continue their steady arc. No hands are visible holding them. No source of flame can be found. As dusk approaches, these occurrences become more frequent. Shadows stretch across the streets, and the stone darkens to near black. The figures appear closer now, sometimes standing just outside doorways or near the mouths of alleys. They do not block the path, but their presence alters how the space feels, making distance difficult to judge. Historical records describe Blackrock Village as a harsh but lively place. Miners and their families filled the streets at dawn. Lantern light once marked every doorway. Laughter and conversation carried late into the night. When the mines closed, the population left quickly, taking what they could and abandoning the rest. There was no single disaster recorded, no sudden event that explains the lingering activity. The village simply emptied, leaving behind structures, tools, and routines without people to complete them. Over time, the desert reclaimed much of what was left, but not all of it faded. Some believe the figures represent memories of daily life replaying in fragments. Others suggest the village itself holds impressions of those who lived there, repeating familiar patterns without awareness. The lanterns, once essential, now swing as if still marking the passage of evening. Those who walk the streets often feel an urge to follow the light. A glowing lantern at the far end of the road draws the eye, offering a sense of direction and purpose. Yet reaching it proves impossible. The distance never quite closes, and the light dims as one approaches. Sound occasionally accompanies the visual disturbances. Footsteps echo faintly where no one walks. Metal clinks softly, like tools being set down. These sounds are brief and never overlap, appearing as isolated moments rather than continuous activity. The village feels incomplete, like a song missing its final notes. Spending extended time in Blackrock Village can be disorienting. Hours pass unnoticed as attention drifts from one empty structure to another. The sun seems to move slower here, its descent marked by deepening shadow rather than clear change. Leaving the village often feels abrupt, as if stepping out of a heavy atmosphere into normal air. Those who return later report the same patterns repeating. The village does not change, but it does not fully rest either. Officials discourage prolonged visits, citing unstable structures and uneven ground. There are no signs warning of figures or lights, only notices about safety and preservation. Blackrock Village is listed as abandoned, its history summarized in brief paragraphs that fail to capture its presence. At night, the village becomes harder to read. Darkness fills the streets, broken only by starlight and occasional lantern glow. The figures blend seamlessly into shadow, visible only when they move slightly or block faint light behind them. Most visitors choose to leave before this point. Those who stay describe a powerful sense of stillness. Not peace, but suspension. By morning, Black Rock Village looks unchanged. Lanterns hang motionless in daylight. The streets show no new marks. It becomes easy to question what was seen, to explain it away as trick of light or imagination. Yet the memory lingers. The sense that the village was not empty, only unoccupied. That the figures and lanterns were not intrusions, but parts of a routine that never learned how to stop. Black Rock Village remains where it has always been, silent and waiting. Not calling attention to itself, not demanding belief. Simply existing, holding the shape of a life that once filled it. And letting that shape surface when conditions are just right. Widow's Hollow sits at the edge of a wide desert plain where wind reshapes the land daily and silence stretches farther than sight. What remains of the settlement is scattered and worn. Narrow alleys cut between structures, half filled with drifting dunes that move subtly from season to season. The name carries weight long before the place is seen. Historical records describe a small but determined community that settled here during an unusually harsh winter. Supplies ran low. One by one, families were lost to cold and isolation. By the time help arrived, the hollow was quiet. Those who survived eventually left, abandoning the settlement to the desert. What remains is not ruin alone, but presence. During the day, Widow's Hollow feels exposed and empty. Sunlight washes over sand and stone, revealing every crack and collapse. The wind moves freely, threading through alleys and broken windows, lifting grains of sand that whisper against walls. There is no vegetation to soften the scene, only the stark geometry of human effort left behind. It is in the late hours that the hollow changes. As the sun lowers, shadows lengthen across the alleys, stretching until they meet and overlap. The temperature drops quickly. Sound carries farther in the cooling air. Footsteps echo longer than expected, even when no one walks. Visitors often report seeing movement at the edge of vision. Figures appear briefly, pacing the alleys with slow, deliberate steps. They do not approach. They do not turn. They follow the same routes again and again. They disappear behind walls that lead nowhere. When looked at directly, they fade into empty air, leaving only sand and shadow behind. These sightings are consistent across decades. Descriptions match in posture and motion. Upright. Unhurried. Purposeful. There is no panic in their movement, no urgency. They walk as if following routines remembered rather than chosen. Soft cries drift through the sand, carried low by the wind. They are faint and indistinct, more suggestion than sound. Some describe them as grief shaped into breath. Others hear only a distant lament, rising and falling without words. The sound does not come from a single direction. It moves with the wind, slipping through alleys and across open ground, sometimes seeming close, sometimes far away. Those who follow it find nothing. The cries never grow louder, never resolve into clarity. They remain just beyond understanding. The sound feels personal. Researchers studying acoustic patterns in desert environments note that wind passing through narrow spaces can produce tones resembling voices. Shifting sand can amplify low frequencies. These explanations offer comfort to some, but they do not fully account for the emotional response reported by listeners. The sound feels personal. Many describe a heaviness that accompanies it, a pressure behind the eyes or a tightening in the chest. Not fear, but sorrow. A sense of loss that feels borrowed rather than imagined. Their presence feels tied to the layout of the hollow itself, bound to alleys and doorways rather than open ground. Some believe the settlement remembers that the routines of daily life, repeated through hardship and loss, left an imprint too strong to fade. Walking paths. Waiting places. The quiet pacing of those who endured long nights, hoping for relief that never came. Others suggest a simpler explanation. The hollow is isolated. The desert magnifies loneliness. In such spaces, the mind seeks pattern and meaning, filling absence with memory and expectation. The figures and sounds may arise from this interaction between environment and imagination. Yet even skeptics admit something feels unresolved here. Time behaves strangely within the hollow. Minutes stretch. Conversations slow. The urge to leave arrives quietly but firmly, as if the place itself sets limits on how long it should be observed. Equipment functions normally, yet recordings made at night often capture long stretches of near silence, punctuated by faint sounds that resist clear identification. No one has ever been harmed. There are no reports of pursuit, no sudden movements, no threats. Widow's Hollow does not act. It remains. It allows itself to be witnessed, briefly, before retreating into stillness once more. Those who visit during daylight often find the night stories difficult to believe. The settlement looks empty, lifeless, stripped of mystery by the sun. But many who stay until dusk experience a shift they cannot easily dismiss. As darkness settles, the hollow feels occupied. Not crowded, not alive, but held. As if the air itself remembers what once filled it. The pacing figures, the drifting cries, the quiet weight that settles over the alleys all suggest continuity rather than intrusion. It does not seek belief. It exists as a space shaped by loss, preserved by isolation, and softened by time. The desert has not erased it. Instead, it has sealed it, holding stories in sand and shadow. When visitors leave, the hollow returns to stillness. Wind smooths footprints. The figures fade. The cries dissolve into the vast night. What remains is the impression. A sense that some places do not move on in the way others do. That memory can linger without voice or form. And that in the quietest corners of the landscape, the past may still be walking, slowly and patiently, through empty alleys beneath an open desert sky. Ashen Flat stretches across a wide, open plain where the ground is pale and dry, dusted with fine gray soil that feels powdery underfoot. The sky above always seems brighter here, the sunlight harsh and unforgiving, bleaching color from everything it touches. Wind moves freely across the flats, carrying faint traces of ash and grit that sting the skin before drifting away. Scattered across the landscape stand the remains of huts and cabins, their wooden frames warped and weathered by years of exposure. Roofs sag inward or have collapsed entirely. Walls lean at uncertain angles, their surfaces cracked and faded to a dull, lifeless tone. Once painted boards now appear stripped of identity, reduced to sun-bleached outlines of what once was shelter. The settlement was never large. Records suggest it served as a temporary outpost, built for work that no longer exists. When the purpose faded, people left in stages, until no one remained. The structures were abandoned without ceremony, left to face the elements alone. Over time, the flats reclaimed them with silence. Visitors approaching Ashen Flats often feel the temperature change before they notice anything else. Even under direct sunlight, the air grows unexpectedly cold. Heat seems to vanish near the cabins, replaced by a chill that clings to exposed skin. Breath becomes visible on certain days, thin clouds dissolving quickly in the dry air. Walking between the buildings feels unnatural. Sound carries poorly across the flats, as if absorbed by the ground. Footsteps make little noise. Wind passes through broken doorways without whistling. The environment feels hollow, emptied of echo, as though the space itself is listening rather than responding. It is in the doorways that figures are most often seen. They appear without warning, framed by darkness inside the cabins. Sometimes they are tall and still. Sometimes shorter, indistinct, barely more than silhouettes. They never step forward. They never retreat. They remain just inside the threshold, where shadow meets light. Watching in complete silence. Those who notice the figures often doubt themselves at first. The sun creates sharp contrasts here, casting long shadows that shift quickly. A glance away and back is sometimes enough for the doorway to appear empty again. Yet the feeling of being observed lingers, heavy and persistent. As visitors move deeper into the settlement, the sensation of touch begins. Cold brushes against the arm. A light pressure against the back of a hand. Fingers that seem to pass through fabric without resistance. The contact is brief, never forceful, but unmistakably intentional. The cold does not resemble wind. It arrives without movement, localized and precise. One moment the air feels still, the next a chill slides across skin like a passing hand. Turning reveals nothing. The open flats offer no hiding place, no explanation. Cabins closer to the center of ashen flats feel heavier, more oppressive. The ground here is darker, stained by long-settled residue. Inside these structures, the air is thicker and colder, carrying a faint mineral scent. Floors creak under weight, though no one walks behind. Some visitors report hearing subtle shifts within the cabins. Not footsteps, but the sound of presence. A change in pressure. A quiet awareness of movement just out of view. The figures appear more frequently in these areas. Always in doorways. Always silent. Their outlines vary, but their behavior remains the same. They do not interact directly. They observe. The longer one remains, the stronger the sense of attention becomes. Despite this, panic rarely overtakes those who visit. The atmosphere encourages caution rather than fear. Movements slow naturally. Voices drop. Even groups fall quiet, instinctively lowering their presence as if to avoid disturbing something that prefers stillness. Attempts to document the figures have proven unreliable. Photographs often show empty doorways or distorted light. Video footage reveals shifting shadows that defy clear interpretation. Thermal readings detect sudden cold spots near structures, but nothing that explains the sensation of touch. Researchers suggest environmental factors. Rapid temperature changes. Air currents trapped within decaying buildings. Leaving ashen flats. Brings noticeable relief. The cold fades gradually. The wind regains warmth. Sound returns to normal, footsteps audible once more. Looking back, the cabins appear unchanged, quiet and empty beneath the bright sky. From a distance, the settlement looks abandoned in every ordinary sense. No movement. No sign of life. Only structures slowly surrendering to time. Yet those who have walked among them know the stillness is not complete. Many visitors report lingering sensations after departure. A chill that follows them briefly. The feeling of being brushed by something unseen even in open space. These sensations fade, but the memory does not. Ashen Flats remains accessible, unmarked by warnings or restrictions. It draws those curious about forgotten places and open landscapes. Most leave with only photographs of ruins and dust. But some leave with something else. A memory of silent figures framed by doorways. Of a place where absence feels crowded. And where the past does not announce itself, but waits quietly, watching, just inside the threshold. Hollow Peak Village rests high above the surrounding valleys, built carefully along jagged rocky outcrops where the ground drops away without warning. From a distance, the village appears frozen in time. Stone homes cling to the cliffs, their foundations carved directly into the rock. Narrow streets wind upward in uneven paths, following the natural shape of the mountain rather than any planned design. Reaching the village requires a long ascent along a single road that narrows as it climbs. Trees thin out quickly, replaced by bare stone and cold air. Sound changes here. Wind moves differently, slipping between rocks and producing low tones that echo longer than expected. Travelers often describe the sensation of entering a place removed from the surrounding world. Hollow Peak Village has no official population records. Some maps mark it faintly. Others omit it entirely. Locals in nearby towns speak of it with hesitation, describing it as a place that remains, even when no one seems to live there. Those who visit during daylight report seeing empty streets and shuttered windows. Yet the village never feels abandoned. As evening approaches, the atmosphere shifts. Shadows begin to move in ways that do not match the setting sun. They stretch and glide along stone walls, flowing smoothly across doorways and corners. These shadows do not belong to visible figures. They detach from their sources, sliding independently along the streets, merging and separating without sound. Merging and separating without sound. Visitors often notice this movement only after standing still for several moments. At first, it feels like a trick of the light. Then the realization settles in that the shadows are traveling against the direction of the fading sun. They pass silently, never crossing directly in front of observers, always staying just within peripheral vision. Lanterns line the alleyways throughout the village. They are mounted to stone walls and iron posts, evenly spaced as if placed with intention. As dusk deepens, these lanterns begin to glow one by one. No flame can be seen within them. No wires or fuel sources are visible. The light is soft and steady, casting a warm hue that contrasts sharply with the cold stone. Despite the illumination, the streets remain empty. Footsteps echo when no one is walking. Doors creak gently in still air. Windows reflect movement from angles that should be impossible. The village feels active without revealing its occupants. The sense of being observed grows stronger the deeper one walks into the alleys. Hollow Peak Village was originally established centuries ago as a lookout settlement. Its position offered clear views of the valleys below, making it ideal for early warning and trade. Records indicate the village prospered briefly, then declined without explanation. No war. No disaster. No mass departure documented. The village simply faded from written history while remaining physically intact. Those who explore the interior spaces report unusual details. Furniture arranged neatly. Tools left in careful order. Personal items placed as if someone intended to return shortly. Dust is present, but not heavy. It feels curated rather than neglected. One visitor described entering a narrow side street as night fully settled. Lantern light reflected off damp stone, and the shadows along the walls moved more freely now, overlapping like ripples. He noticed his own shadow lagging slightly behind him, stretching in a direction that did not align with his movement. When he stopped, it continued for a brief moment before dissolving into the wall. Another account tells of a traveler who followed a softly lit alley that seemed to lead downward. The stone steps descended deeper than expected, winding between buildings pressed closely together. At the bottom, the lantern light grew brighter. Yet the space ahead appeared hollow, as if the village opened into something unseen. Panic rose suddenly, without cause. And the traveler retreated, finding the steps shorter on the return climb than they had been moments earlier. No one reports being chased or directly confronted in Hollow Peak Village. The feeling that something should be there, but is not. Or perhaps is present in a form that does not wish to be seen. Lanterns continue to glow regardless of weather or time. Even during heavy fog, their light cuts through with unwavering clarity. Researchers who have attempted to document the phenomenon face consistent difficulties. Cameras fail to capture the moving shadows accurately. Footage often shows static streets or distorted light. Audio recordings pick up wind and ambient noise, but never footsteps or movement that witnesses insist were present. Local belief offers a quieter explanation. According to long-shared stories, Hollow Peak Village is not empty, but layered. Its streets exist in more than one state at once. The lanterns serve as markers, keeping the layers aligned. The shadows are remnants of movement from another time, passing through briefly when conditions allow. Visitors who stay overnight rarely sleep well. Dreams are vivid and unfamiliar. Many describe walking the village streets alongside unseen companions, guided by lantern light that never fades. Upon waking, they feel rested yet unsettled, as if they have been somewhere else entirely. At dawn, the village returns to stillness. Shadows behave normally. Lanterns extinguish without ceremony. The streets appear exactly as they did before. Quiet and empty. There is no sign of the movement that filled the night. Hollow Peak Village does not close itself to visitors. It does not warn them away. It simply exists on its own terms, revealing only what it chooses when light fades and silence deepens. Those who leave often look back one final time. From a distance, the village appears unchanged, perched calmly against the mountain. Yet many carry the same lingering thought. That if they had stayed just a little longer, if they had followed the shadows instead of avoiding them, they might have seen the village as it truly is, alive in a way that does not require bodies, voices, or time. Bloodstone Camp lies far from marked roads, set within a wide basin of fine sand and scattered stone. During the day, the site appears quiet and unremarkable. As evening approaches, the character of the place begins. The air cools rapidly, and sound carries farther than expected. Footsteps seem louder, then suddenly muted. The horizon feels distant, as if the land has expanded during the fading light. Those who remain after sunset often describe a growing sense of anticipation, though nothing specific appears to cause it. Under moonlight, the sand reveals its first anomaly. A faint red glow emerges across the ground, subtle but unmistakable. It does not shine like a light source, but rather reflects with a deep, muted hue, as if the sand itself remembers heat long after the sun has gone. The glow shifts gently as clouds pass, brightening and dimming without pattern. Geologists have examined samples from the area and found high concentrations of iron-rich minerals, which may explain some coloration. Yet these explanations fail to account for the uniform glow that appears only at night, and only under moonlight. Artificial light does not produce the same effect. Lanterns and flashlights reveal ordinary sand, pale and dull. As the night deepens, the ground itself seems to stir. Visitors report subtle movement beneath the surface, like pressure building slowly from below. The sand rises in shallow mounds, then settles again. These disturbances are silent, leaving no marks once they fade, as if the surface smooths itself intentionally. It is during these moments that figures are said to appear. They do not emerge violently or suddenly. Instead, they rise gradually, their forms assembling from the sand as though shaped by unseen hands. At first, only outlines are visible, human in proportion but lacking detail. Arms hang at their sides. Heads tilt slightly forward. The figures never fully solidify. Their surfaces remain textured like the ground they come from, grainy and uneven. Observers report a profound stillness during these appearances. Wind dies down. Insects fall silent. Even breathing feels louder, intrusive against the quiet. The figures do not acknowledge those watching. They do not approach, gesture, or react. They simply stand, rising and remaining for several moments before slowly sinking back into the sand. Whispers often accompany these events. The sound is soft, barely audible, and difficult to locate. It does not echo or carry like normal speech. Instead, it seems to form directly near the listener, close to the ear, yet without breath or warmth. The whispers speak names, spoken clearly and calmly. What unsettles visitors most is recognition. The names spoken are personal, accurate, and pronounced correctly. Even those who have shared no information report hearing their own names called. The tone is neither threatening nor welcoming. It carries no emotion, only certainty, as if stating a fact rather than making a request. Those who respond, even softly, report an immediate intensification of the experience. The whispers grow closer. The red glow deepens. The figures linger longer. Before sinking away. For this reason, guides familiar with the area advise silence at all times after dark. Historical records about Bloodstone Camp are limited. The site was once used intermittently by travelers and workers passing through the region. It never developed into a permanent settlement, and no single event explains why it was abandoned. Over time, it simply fell out of use, its name appearing less frequently on maps until it vanished altogether. Local accounts suggest the land was always considered unsettled. Early travelers noted strange reflections in the sand and avoided camping overnight when possible. These warnings were often ignored, dismissed as superstition. Those who stayed rarely spoke about their experiences afterward, choosing silence over explanation. Modern visitors who experience the phenomena often describe lingering effects. Sleep becomes restless for days after leaving. Whispers seem to return in quiet moments, never as clear as they were at the camp, but present enough to be unsettling. Some report dreaming of standing figures half buried in sand, watching without expression. Despite these reports, Bloodstone Camp remains accessible. There are no fences or warning signs, only open land and empty space. Officials classify the area as geologically unremarkable and discourage night visits due to disorientation risks. No mention is made of glowing sand or rising figures. Those who return to the site during daylight often struggle to reconcile the two versions of the place. In sunlight, the sand is pale and lifeless. Footprints from the night before are gone, erased by wind and time. The ground shows no sign of disturbance, no indication that anything ever moved beneath it. Yet the memory of the night remains vivid. The color of the sand under moonlight. The stillness that pressed in from all sides. The quiet certainty of hearing one's own name spoken by something unseen. Bloodstone Camp does not feel hostile, but it does not feel empty either. It gives the impression of a place that remembers every visitor, storing their presence in the ground itself. When night falls and the moon rises, those memories seem to surface, briefly and silently, before returning to rest. Those who leave before dawn often describe a sense of release, as if stepping away from an invisible boundary. The whispers fade with distance. The glow disappears. Normal sounds return. Still, many find themselves looking back, unsettled by the feeling that the camp is watching them go. Bloodstone Camp remains where it has always been, unchanged by explanation or denial. A quiet place by day, and something far less certain by night. It does not seek attention or belief. It waits, patient beneath the sand, until moonlight returns and the ground remembers what it knows how to do. Ironclad Village rests in a shallow mountain valley where the earth was once cut open for ore and ambition. Weathered buildings line a single main street, their wooden frames darkened by time and iron dust. Rust stains the ground in places where tools were dropped and never lifted again. The air carries a faint metallic scent, lingering long after the mines fell silent. The village was built quickly and with purpose. Miners arrived in waves, raising homes, workshops, and storage sheds with whatever materials were close at hand. Porches were added as places to rest aching bodies at the end of long shifts underground. Tools were left where they were most needed, leaned against walls or hung from nails driven into rough boards. Efficiency mattered more than permanence. For a time, ironclad village thrived. Then the ore thinned. Accidents increased. Supply routes faltered. Slowly, families left, following work elsewhere. The mines closed one by one. What remained was a settlement paused mid-motion, never fully dismantled, never fully abandoned. Visitors today often notice the tools first. Old pickaxes, shovels, and carts remain scattered throughout the village. Some are half buried in dirt. Others rest inside open sheds. Many report that these objects do not always stay where they are left. A shovel leaned against a wall may be found lying flat hours later. A cartwheel that was still suddenly rests at an angle. There is no sound when this happens. No scrape of metal. No impact. Only the quiet realization that something has shifted without explanation. Wind is often blamed, but many tools are heavy, balanced in ways that should resist simple movement. As dusk approaches, the village changes. Light fades unevenly, caught between buildings and broken fences. The air cools quickly, and with it comes a sense of occupation, as though the village is no longer empty. Figures appear on porches during these hours. They crouch low, elbows resting on knees, heads bowed slightly forward. They do not look outward, and they do not move when noticed. Their forms are solid enough to block light, yet lack detail. Faces cannot be seen. Clothing is indistinct, blending into shadow and wood. When approached, the porches are empty. No marks are left behind. No disturbance. Only the impression that something was there moments before, waiting or resting in a familiar posture. The figures are never seen standing or walking, only crouched, as if paused between effort and recovery. Footsteps are the most commonly reported sound. They echo along the main street, steady and deliberate, matching the rhythm of a person walking alone. The sound carries clearly, bouncing between buildings that should amplify it. Yet when followed, the street remains empty. The footsteps continue for several seconds, then stop abruptly, leaving silence behind. These sounds occur most often at night. Under moonlight, ironclad village feels preserved rather than ruined. Rooflines remain sharp. Doorways frame darkness. The mines loom at the edge of sight, their entrances collapsed but unmistakable. The sense of routine returns, as if the village remembers what it was meant to do after dark. Some researchers suggest natural explanations. Temperature shifts can cause old wood to creak. Metal contracts and expands. Animals may move unseen through shadows. Tools move without noise. Footsteps follow human cadence. Figures appear only where people once gathered. Those who stay overnight often report vivid dreams. Dreams of labor. Of repetitive motion. Of waiting on porches for dawn. These dreams are not frightening, but heavy, filled with effort and expectation. Upon waking, many feel tired, as if rest was incomplete. Despite these experiences, Ironclad Village shows no hostility. No one has been chased. No one has been touched. The village does not react to visitors with aggression or warning. It allows observation, brief and distant, then returns to stillness. The sense most often described is continuation. As if the work never truly ended, only slowed beyond visibility. Tools shift because they were meant to be used. Footsteps echo because walking once filled the streets. Figures crouch because rest was earned and necessary. The village feels less like a place haunted by loss and more like one held in suspension. Time did not erase it. It paused it. As morning arrives, activity fades. Tools remain still. Porches empty. The street grows quiet once more. Visitors leaving Ironclad Village often do so with mixed feelings. Curiosity lingers alongside respect. The experiences feel personal, yet not addressed. As if the village acknowledged presence without requiring response. Ironclad Village stands as a reminder of how deeply human effort can shape a place. Not just through buildings and tools, but through routine, labor, and repetition. When those patterns stop abruptly, they do not always disappear. Sometimes, they echo quietly, moving objects slightly, pacing empty streets, and resting on porches long after the last shift ended. The village still remembers the weight of iron, the sound of boots on dirt, and the simple act of pausing to breathe before returning to work once more. Mistvale Village rests at the edge of a wide basin where steep canyons funnel cool air into the low ground. Until the village feels removed from the surrounding world. From a distance, the settlement appears intact. Rows of small buildings stand in quiet order. Windows remain unbroken. Doors hang on their hinges. Faded paint clings stubbornly to wood and stone. The village does not look destroyed. It looks paused. The fog reaches the streets first, sliding along the ground before rising to waist height. It carries a faint chill and a clean, mineral scent drawn from the canyon walls. As it thickens, visibility shortens, and familiar distances stretch into uncertainty. A building seen clearly one moment becomes a vague outline the next. Walking through Mistvale Village feels unusually intimate. Sound behaves differently here. Footsteps echo softly, then vanish. Wind moves above rooftops but rarely touches the streets. Voices sound close even when spoken quietly, then fade without direction. The fog absorbs noise, reshaping it into something muted and indistinct. Figures begin to appear once the mist fully settles. At first, they seem like shapes formed by drifting vapor. A darker patch. A suggestion of movement. But then they cross a street or pass between buildings with clear intention. Their outlines remain soft, never fully defined, as if the fog refuses to reveal detail. As if the fog slows time. Some appear taller. Others shorter. All remain silent. Visitors often stop walking when they notice the figures. Standing still brings a strange calm. The fog continues to drift, and the figures continue their paths, unconcerned by observation. There is no sense of threat, only presence. Then comes the laughter. It arrives softly, woven into the fog like distant music. Not loud. Not sudden. It echoes lightly between buildings, rising and falling as if carried on gentle air currents. The sound resembles laughter remembered rather than heard directly. Warm and fleeting. The sound of laughter. There is no sense of threat, only presence. Only presence. The laughter does not come from a single source. It moves. One moment it seems close, just around a corner. The next, it drifts farther away, echoing faintly down an empty street. Those who follow the sound find only fog and stillness. Buildings stand open and empty. Rooms show signs of former life but no recent use. Furniture remains where it was left. Dust lies undisturbed. The laughter fades when approached, then returns elsewhere. Mistvale Village once supported a small population that relied on canyon trade routes. When those routes closed, the village emptied gradually. Families left behind items they could not carry, expecting to return. They never did. Over time, the fog became a defining feature, rolling in more frequently as the village fell silent. Environmental studies suggest temperature differences between canyon walls and the basin floor create ideal conditions for persistent mist. Acoustics shaped by stone and narrow streets explain the strange way sound travels. These explanations account for parts of the experience, but not the figures, and not the laughter. As visitors move deeper into the village, the fog thickens further. Streets blur together. Landmarks become harder to recognize. Turning a corner does not always lead where expected. The village seems to rearrange itself subtly, encouraging wandering rather than passage. The figures appear more frequently in these inner areas. They cross intersections. They stand briefly at the ends of streets before fading back into mist. They never block the way. They never signal. They simply exist, woven into the movement of fog and shadow. The laughter grows slightly clearer here, carrying hints of joy rather than menace. It does not mock or taunt. It feels unaware of listeners, as if echoing from another time entirely. The sound brings an unexpected sense of nostalgia, even to those with no connection to the place. Others describe the sensation of passing through moments that do not belong to them, brushing against memories left behind. Despite the strange atmosphere, fear remains distant. The village does not press inward. It does not trap or chase. It invites observation without demand. Those who linger too long feel a growing pull to sit, to listen, to remain still and let the fog move around them. Leaving Mistvale Village requires intention. The fog thins gradually near the outer streets. The laughter fades into silence. The figures appear one last time at a distance, then dissolve completely as clear air takes hold. Looking back from higher ground reveals an ordinary abandoned settlement. Buildings stand quiet beneath drifting mist. No movement is visible. No sound carries upward. The village appears empty in every measurable way. Yet those who have walked its streets often carry the experience with them. The memory of figures moving just beyond clarity. The echo of soft laughter lingering at the edge of hearing. The feeling of having visited a place that exists partly in the present, and partly somewhere just out of reach. Mistvale Village remains where it has always been, waiting at the edge of the canyon basin. And when the mist is thick enough, the village remembers itself, allowing shapes to walk again, and laughter to rise softly among buildings that refuse to forget. Shadow Creek Village lies in a shallow basin where the land dips gently and the sky feels unusually wide. The settlement is built around a dry creek bed that cuts through its center like a pale scar. Smooth stones line the channel, worn by water that no longer flows. The creek has been dry for longer than most records can confirm, yet the village remains, quiet and intact, shaped by something that once moved steadily through it. During the day, Shadow Creek Village appears calm and unremarkable. Modest homes sit back from the creek banks, their walls faded by sun and dust. Wooden bridges cross the empty channel at regular intervals, connecting narrow streets that curve gently rather than meeting at sharp angles. The air is warm, still, and carries the faint scent of earth. Visitors often describe an immediate sense of unease, though nothing obvious seems out of place. The creek bed draws attention first. Its stones are arranged naturally, yet certain areas appear disturbed. As if something has shifted them recently. There are shallow impressions along the banks, not quite footprints, but marks that suggest weight pressed close to the ground. Locals rarely linger near the creek, choosing paths that keep a respectful distance from its edges. As evening approaches, the atmosphere changes subtly. Light fades faster near the creek than in the rest of the village. Shadows gather along the banks, stretching inward from both sides until the channel seems deeper than it truly is. It is during this time that figures are most often seen. Visitors describe shapes crouched low along the creek bed, partially hidden among stones and scrub. They appear briefly, just long enough to be noticed, then slip out of view. The figures do not stand. They remain close to the ground, motionless or shifting slowly, as if listening. Their outlines are vague, blending into shadow and earth, making it difficult to determine where the ground ends and something else begins. Those who try to observe more closely often feel a strong resistance, not physical, but instinctive. A sudden urge to look away. A tightening in the chest. The sense that attention itself is unwelcome. Cameras aimed toward the creek frequently fail to capture anything unusual, producing images that show only empty stones and fading light. As night settles over Shadow Creek Village, the wind begins to move. The wind travels along the dry channel, following its curves and bends. Lifting dust and whispering through gaps between stones. Within this sound, many hear something more. Faint murmurs that do not form words, yet carry tone and intent. The whispers seem to rise from the creek itself, carried upward and outward into the village streets. Listeners describe the experience differently. Some hear what feels like distant conversation, layered and overlapping. Others sense a low, steady urging, as if the wind is trying to draw them closer to the creek. The sound is never loud. It requires attention to notice, and once noticed, it becomes difficult to ignore. Long-time residents treat the whispers as part of daily life. Windows are closed at night. Doors are secured before dusk. Children are taught early to avoid the creek after sunset. Questions about the figures and the voices are answered indirectly, with reminders to stay on well-traveled paths, and to listen to the wind without responding to it. Historical accounts suggest the creek once played a vital role in the village. It provided water, trade routes, and a gathering place. Then, gradually, the water receded. Some records mention years of drought, while others speak of sudden disappearance. No single explanation accounts for how completely the creek dried up, nor why the village remained after its loss. One theory suggests the creek did not simply vanish, but changed. That something essential was left behind when the water stopped flowing. The crouched figures are not aggressive, but attentive, responding to movement and awareness rather than action. Visitors who stay overnight often report vivid dreams. Images of flowing water. Hands brushing against stone. The feeling of kneeling beside the creek, listening closely. Waking brings relief, but also a lingering sense of having been observed while asleep. Some wake to find fine dust on their shoes or clothing, as if they had walked near the creek without remembering it. A traveling historian once attempted to map the village in detail, focusing on the creek bed and its surroundings. His notes describe shifting measurements, distances that changed between visits, and paths that seemed to realign themselves overnight. He left abruptly, citing exhaustion and confusion, and never returned to complete his work. Despite these accounts, Shadow Creek Village continues quietly. People pass through during the day, staying briefly, leaving with stories they struggle to explain. The village does not trap its visitors. It does not pursue them. It simply remains, shaped around absence and sound. At dawn, the whispers fade. The wind settles. The creek bed returns to stillness, its stones pale and ordinary in the morning light. Those who leave at sunrise often glance back one last time. The village looks peaceful, almost welcoming. Yet the memory of the night lingers. The sense of figures crouched just out of sight. Shadow Creek Village exists in balance with what it has lost. The dry channel at its center holds more than stone and dust. It holds attention, memory, and waiting. As long as the creek remains empty, the village listens. And something along its banks continues to listen back. Deadman's camp spreads across a wide stretch of barren ground, its size immediately setting it apart from other abandoned settlements. Long streets cut through rows of collapsed buildings, and open squares mark where trade and gathering once took place. From above, the layout is orderly, almost proud, suggesting a place built with confidence in its future. Approaching the camp on foot, the first impression is scale. Structures extend farther than expected, their outlines softened by dust and time. Stone foundations remain solid, while wooden frames have collapsed inward, leaving doorways that open into nothing. The air feels still, heavy with the absence of movement. During daylight, Deadman's camp appears empty but intact. Tools lie where they were dropped. Barrels sit beside walls, their lids long gone. Paths between buildings are worn smooth, evidence of countless footsteps that once passed through daily. It feels less like a ruin and more like a place paused mid-use. As shadows lengthen, the atmosphere changes. Sound begins to behave strangely, carrying farther and lingering longer. A single footstep echoes down an empty street, returning slightly altered, as if someone else stepped a moment later. Wind brushes through the camp, stirring loose debris in brief, restless motions. Figures are most often reported near the edges of vision. A shape stands at the far end of a street, partially obscured by a leaning wall. Another appears between buildings, visible only for a moment before fading into shadow. These figures are upright and human in outline, but indistinct, lacking features or color. They do not approach directly. Instead, they seem to reposition when not observed, appearing closer or farther without crossing visible distance. Visitors who turn quickly often see nothing at all, while those who look slowly catch brief glimpses of movement that stop the instant attention settles. Lantern sounds are among the most common experiences. The soft clink of metal rings against glass carries through the streets, accompanied by the gentle creak of swinging hooks. The sound suggests movement overhead, yet no lanterns are visibly lit. When lanterns are found, they hang motionless, coated in dust. At night, the sounds intensify. Footsteps follow behind visitors, matching pace but never overtaking. When walking stops, the footsteps stop as well. Turning reveals empty streets, yet the sense of presence remains strong, as if something is choosing to remain just out of sight. Many describe the feeling as being escorted rather than chased. The camp does not feel aggressive. Instead, it feels attentive, aware of movement and direction. The figures seem to appear where attention is weakest, guiding visitors along certain paths while discouraging others. Historical records identify Deadman's Camp as the largest settlement in the region during its peak. Hundreds lived and worked here, supported by nearby resources and steady trade. The camp expanded rapidly, its streets planned for growth that never fully arrived. The reasons for its abandonment remain unclear. There is no record of disaster or conflict significant enough to explain the sudden departure. Supplies were left behind. Personal items remained scattered throughout buildings. It appears the residents left quickly, but not in panic. Some historians suggest economic collapse or resource depletion, while others point to environmental factors. None of these explanations account for the persistent reports of activity long after the camp was deserted. The sense of routine seems to linger, as if daily life never fully concluded. Visitors often report the impression of being observed from multiple directions at once. Standing in an open square, they feel surrounded, despite seeing no one. The space feels occupied, layered with presence that does not manifest fully. Breathing becomes shallow, not from fear, but from heightened awareness. Footsteps sometimes shift position, moving from behind to beside, then ahead. The sound never grows louder, never signals approach. It remains consistent, as though matching a remembered pattern rather than reacting to the present. Those who stay longer notice repetition. The same figure appears in multiple places. The same lantern sound repeats at regular intervals. The camp feels caught in a loop, replaying fragments of activity without progression or resolution. Despite the unsettling experiences, many visitors note a strange calm within the camp. Search teams and officials acknowledge reports of sounds and sightings but attribute them to wind, wildlife, and human perception. They advise caution due to unstable structures and uneven ground. There are no warnings posted about figures or footsteps. Those who leave Deadman's camp often do so without realizing how long they have stayed. Time seems distorted within the settlement. Watches and devices show accurate readings, yet memory compresses the experience, making hours feel like moments. Upon exiting, the silence feels sudden and complete. The footsteps cease. The lantern sounds fade. Looking back, the camp appears still and lifeless once more, its streets empty and unmoving. Many visitors report a lingering sensation after departure. The feeling of being followed continues briefly, even in open terrain. Even in open terrain. It fades gradually, replaced by a quiet certainty that the camp is no longer watching. Deadman's Camp remains the largest of the abandoned settlements, not only in size but in presence. It does not hide its emptiness, nor does it fully surrender to it. The streets remain ready. The structures remain standing. The space holds the memory of movement, of light, of sound. Those who walk its streets often leave with the same impression. The camp is not haunted in the traditional sense. It is occupied by routine, by repetition, by the echo of lives that once filled every corner. And when footsteps follow and lanterns seem to swing in unseen hands, it feels less like an intrusion, and more like a reminder that the place has not finished being what it was. Hollow Sand Village rests where the dunes rise and fall like slow waves frozen in place. The settlement is scattered rather than planned, with cabins set apart from one another as if placed wherever the sand briefly allowed. Weathered wood contrasts against pale ground, and wind smooths the landscape daily, erasing clear paths between structures. Cabins lean slightly under the pressure of shifting sand, their foundations half buried, their steps leading nowhere in particular. Doors creak softly when touched by wind. Windows are clouded with dust. No fences remain intact. Everything feels lightly anchored, as though the village could drift if the wind chose differently. During the day, Hollow Sand Village feels empty but not abandoned. Sunlight reflects sharply off the dunes, filling the air with brightness and heat. The cabins cast short shadows, offering little relief. The cabins cast short shadows, offering little relief. Footprints appear clearly in the sand, only to soften and fade within minutes. Footprints appear clearly in the sand, only to soften and fade within minutes. There is a sense that nothing here is meant to last long, including evidence of presence. There is a sense that nothing here is meant to last long, including evidence of presence. As evening approaches, the atmosphere shifts. As evening approaches, the atmosphere shifts. The wind slows. The dunes cool. The wind slows. The dunes cool. Shadows stretch across the sand, linking cabins that stood isolated hours before. Shadows stretch across the sand, linking cabins that stood isolated hours before. Sound carries farther, though it remains muted, wrapped in soft grains and open space. Sound carries farther, though it remains muted, wrapped in soft grains and open space. It is during these hours that figures are seen. They glide silently among the buildings, moving with smooth, continuous motion rather than steps. Their forms are faint, slightly darker than the surrounding air, as if shaped from shadow and dust. They do not disturb the sand. No footprints follow them. They pass between cabins without turning their heads, following routes that suggest familiarity. Witnesses describe the movement as purposeful but unhurried. The figures do not rush. They do not wander. They move as though performing routines long established, crossing open ground and slipping behind walls before dissolving into nothing. When watched directly, they often fade, leaving only the quiet outline of a cabin where they were moments before. Despite the openness of the dunes, sound feels dampened within the village. Voices seem smaller. Footsteps feel distant, even when close. This quiet heightens awareness, drawing attention inward rather than outward. Many visitors report a distinct sensation while walking between cabins. A feeling of presence walking beside them, matching pace without sound. It is not felt as a threat. There is no touch, no pressure, only awareness. Turning reveals nothing. Stopping causes the sensation to pause as well, resuming when movement begins again. This experience is consistent across accounts. The presence remains just out of reach, close enough to be noticed but never confirmed. It does not lead or follow aggressively. It accompanies, as if sharing the walk rather than guiding it. Local history offers few clear answers. Records suggest the village was once used seasonally, a temporary settlement for workers who followed resources that shifted with the land. When conditions changed, people moved on, leaving behind cabins built for necessity rather than permanence. Over time, the desert reclaimed the space. Some believe the village retains echoes of those routines. The gliding figures may reflect movement adapted to sand, careful and efficient. The sensed presence may be a memory of companionship, of people rarely walking alone in such an environment. In isolation, awareness of others becomes essential. Others argue the environment itself creates the illusion. The dunes reflect light unpredictably. Heat and cooling air distort perception. The vast openness can trick the senses, producing impressions of motion and proximity where none exist. Yet this explanation struggles to account for the shared nature of the experiences. The figures appear more frequently, moving between structures with quiet regularity. Despite this, fear is uncommon. Visitors often describe calm curiosity rather than alarm. The village does not react to observation. It does not surround or isolate. The figures maintain distance. The presence remains gentle, almost reassuring, like company offered without demand. Those who spend extended time here note changes in perception. Time feels slower. Conversations trail off naturally. Movement becomes deliberate. The constant reshaping of the dunes encourages patience. Plans feel less important than awareness of the moment. No physical interaction has ever been reported. At dawn, Hollow Sand Village returns to stillness. The figures vanish with the first strong light. The sense of presence fades. Wind resumes its work, reshaping the dunes, erasing any trace of night movement. The cabins stand quietly once more, scattered and silent. Looking back, the village appears empty again. Just wood and sand beneath an open sky. Yet those who have walked among the cabins carry something with them when they leave. Not fear, but awareness. A sense that the space was shared, briefly and respectfully. Hollow Sand Village does not demand explanation. It does not insist on belief. It exists as a place shaped by movement, memory, and absence. A settlement that learned how to drift with its environment. And perhaps taught those who passed through that solitude is rarely as complete as it seems. In the quiet between dunes and cabins, the village continues its gentle motion, gliding unseen, walking beside those who enter, and reminding them that even in the most open landscapes, presence can be felt without ever being seen. Black Pine Settlement sits where dry desert ground gives way to an unexpected forest of tall pines. The approach is quiet. Sand gradually gives way to packed soil and scattered needles. The temperature drops noticeably beneath the trees, replacing desert heat with a cool, shaded calm. Light filters down in narrow beams, shifting slowly across the ground as the day moves on. The settlement itself is modest. A cluster of small buildings rests in a clearing, their walls weathered but standing. Wood has faded to pale gray, and stone foundations show signs of age without collapse. Doors hang slightly open. Windows stare outward, dark and reflective beneath layers of dust. No signs explain when or why Black Pine settlement was abandoned. Records suggest it served as a waypoint, a place for rest rather than permanence. Over time, travel routes changed, and the village faded into stillness. The pines remained, growing taller and closer, tightening their circle around the empty structures. Visitors often notice movement among the trees before they reach the buildings. Shapes appear briefly between trunks, darker than shadow yet lighter than bark. They move laterally, never toward the clearing, never fully into view. A glance too long causes them to vanish, leaving only vertical lines of pine stretching into height. Yet the sightings repeat with consistency. Always between trees. Always just beyond clarity. Never making a sound. Walking deeper into the settlement brings a growing awareness of cold. Not a general chill, but precise touches. A brief pressure at the wrist or elbow. The sensation is fleeting, cool and deliberate, like contact made in passing. Turning reveals nothing nearby. The air itself remains calm. No wind accompanies the touch. Sleeves do not move. Turning reveals nothing nearby. The pines stand evenly spaced, their lower branches sparse, offering little cover for anything physical. Those who stop walking often feel the touches fade. Standing still brings quiet, both in sensation and sound. When movement resumes, the contact returns, brushing lightly again, never gripping, never pulling. Inside the settlement, sound behaves strangely. Footsteps echo softly against building walls, then fall flat. Voices carry only a short distance before dissolving among the trees. Even the natural creak of wood feels subdued, as if absorbed by needles and bark. The figures appear more frequently here. Their movement is smooth and measured. They never enter the open space, as though bound to the forest line. Some visitors describe the sense that the figures are watching, not with threat, but with awareness. The feeling is similar to being observed quietly, without judgment or expectation. The forest feels occupied, though nothing stands fully revealed. Exploration of the buildings reveals signs of ordinary life long interrupted. Tables remain upright. Shelves hold empty containers. Faded fabric hangs where it was left. Dust coats everything evenly, undisturbed by recent activity. There are no signs of struggle or damage. Yet the cold follows inside. Fingers brush past skin in narrow hallways. A light touch passes along the back of a hand resting at Oni's side. The sensation is unmistakable, gentle but intentional, as if marking presence rather than causing alarm. Researchers have measured temperature differences within Black Pine settlement. Cold spots appear and vanish without pattern. Instruments register brief drops near tree lines and building entrances. No lasting anomalies remain when tested again. Attempts to capture the figures have proven unsuccessful. Cameras record empty forest. Motion sensors activate without visible cause. Audio devices pick up nothing beyond natural ambient noise. The experiences resist translation into data. As daylight shifts, shadows lengthen beneath the pines. The figures become harder to distinguish, blending more seamlessly into the vertical lines of trunks. Visitors report the sensation of being followed without pursuit, accompanied without closeness. Despite the unusual atmosphere, fear rarely dominates. The settlement feels restrained, careful in its interactions. The touches do not escalate. The figures do not approach. The forest maintains a steady distance, observing rather than intruding. Leaving Black Pine Settlement brings gradual change. The pines thin. Sunlight grows stronger. Warmth returns in layers, replacing the persistent cool. The touches stop without notice, leaving arms feeling briefly empty. As if something has stepped away. Looking back from the edge of the forest, the settlement appears unchanged. Buildings sit quietly in their clearing. Pines stand tall and unmoving. No figures cross between trunks. No motion draws the eye. Yet those who have visited often carry the memory vividly. The sense of quiet presence. The fleeting shapes between trees. The unmistakable brush of cold fingers in still air. Black Pine Settlement remains accessible. Unmarked by warnings or explanations. It rests where desert and forest meet. A place shaped by patience and shade. The pines continue to surround it, standing watch as they always have. And for those who walk beneath their branches, the forest sometimes reaches out. Not to stop them, but to remind them that they are not alone among the trees. Ghostlight Village sits at the edge of a wide marshland where the ground remains damp year-round and fog drifts in without warning. A narrow road leads to the settlement, lined with tall grasses that whisper softly even when the air is still. From a distance, the village appears modest and quiet, a scattering of wooden cabins arranged along curved paths that follow the shape of the land. There are no signs marking its name, yet many know when they have arrived. During the day, Ghostlight Village feels strangely subdued. Sunlight reflects weakly off weathered wood and shallow pools of water between buildings. Cabins stand intact, their porches swept clean, their windows clear. There are signs of care here, but little sign of activity. Doors are closed, yet unlocked. Chairs sit neatly arranged, as if occupants stepped away only moments before. As evening approaches, the fog begins to gather. It rolls in low and slow, slipping between cabins and wrapping around porch posts and railings. The air cools rapidly, and sound becomes muted. Footsteps soften. Voices carry only a short distance before dissolving. It is at this time that the first lanterns appear. Soft points of light rise gently among the cabins, floating at shoulder height. The lanterns glow with a steady warmth, illuminating narrow paths and doorways. There is no visible flame and no one holding them. They drift calmly, pausing near porches or hovering at intersections, as if guiding movement through the village. Visitors often mistake the lanterns for signs of welcome. The lights never rush. They move at a walking pace, allowing plenty of time to observe their surroundings. Yet those who rely on them too closely often realize too late that they no longer recognize where they are. They stand silently on porches, partially obscured by fog and shadow. Their forms are human in outline, still and upright, hands resting at their sides or folded calmly. They do not wave or speak. They do not step forward. They simply watch, faces turned toward the paths below. Those who notice the figures often feel a sudden heaviness, as though the air has thickened. The sense of being observed becomes impossible to ignore. Attempts to approach are rarely successful. Distance seems to stretch, porches remaining just out of reach no matter how many steps are taken. When attention drifts even briefly, the figures are gone. Pale faces are sometimes seen in the fog, emerging briefly between lantern light and shadow. They appear close, then fade instantly, leaving behind a chill that lingers on the skin. The faces are expressionless, neither threatening nor welcoming. They seem to observe rather than engage, studying visitors with quiet curiosity. Despite the unsettling sights, Ghostlight Village does not feel aggressive. There is no sudden movement, no pursuit, no raised voices. Everything unfolds slowly, deliberately. The atmosphere encourages calm, even as tension builds. Panic feels out of place here, as if the village itself resists it. Historical information about Ghostlight Village is limited. Maps mark the area inconsistently. Some list a settlement. Others leave it blank. There is no clear account of abandonment, no single event marking a departure. Locals in nearby regions speak of the village with quiet caution. They describe it as a place caught between use and memory. According to long-held belief, Ghostlight Village did not empty suddenly. It thinned gradually, residents leaving one by one until routine remained without people. Lanterns continued to be lit. Porches continued to be watched. The village learned how to persist without its inhabitants. Visitors who stay overnight report strange distortions of time. Hours pass unnoticed. Sleep comes easily but feels shallow. Dreams blend seamlessly with waking moments. Some wake to see lantern light passing slowly outside their windows, casting moving patterns across walls and ceilings. One traveler described stepping outside during the night, drawn by the glow. The fog parted just enough to reveal several figures standing across the village, evenly spaced, all facing inward. Lanterns hovered between them, creating a quiet circle of light. The traveler felt no fear, only a profound stillness, as if he had entered a moment meant to be observed rather than altered. Another account tells of a visitor who attempted to leave after dark. The road leading out appeared longer than before, bending subtly away from its original direction. Lanterns drifted alongside for a time, then stopped, hovering in place as the visitor continued alone. Only after the fog lifted near dawn did the road return to its familiar shape. Cameras and recording devices rarely function as expected in Ghostlight Village. Photos show blurred lights without source. Videos capture fog and darkness where witnesses insist lanterns floated clearly. Audio recordings reveal only soft ambient noise, no footsteps, no voices, no explanation. By morning, the village changes again. Fog lifts. Lanterns vanish. Porches stand empty. The cabins appear ordinary, almost abandoned. The sense of being watched fades, replaced by a quiet that feels restful rather than tense. Those who leave at first light often pause at the edge of the marsh, looking back one last time. In daylight, Ghostlight Village seems harmless, even peaceful. Yet the memory of floating lanterns, silent figures, and pale faces lingers long after departure. The village does not follow those who leave. It does not call them back. It remains where it is, waiting for fog, for dusk, for the moment when lights rise gently into the air once more. Ghostlight Village endures not through fear, but through presence. A place where light moves without hands, where figures stand without words, and where the fog reveals just enough to remind visitors that some places do not fade when people leave. They simply learn how to exist quietly, illuminated by ghostly light, watching from their porches as the world passes by. Ashwood Camp rests at the edge of a wide, sandy plain where the ground darkens with old ash and wind-smoothed grit. By day, the settlement feels empty and subdued. Sunlight reveals rows of low structures, their frames bleached and worn, standing quietly against the open horizon. There is no movement, no sound beyond the wind brushing lightly across the sand. The layout of the camp suggests careful planning. Streets run straight and evenly spaced, forming a grid that once guided daily life. Fire pits sit cold and filled with dust. Posts that once held lanterns now stand bare, their hooks rusted and still. Everything appears orderly, preserved in a state of waiting rather than decay. During daylight hours, visitors often describe Ashwood Camp as peaceful. The silence feels intentional, almost respectful. Footsteps leave clear prints in the sand, and the absence of noise allows even the smallest movements to feel significant. It is easy to believe the camp was simply abandoned and forgotten, left to rest under the sun. As evening approaches, the character of the place begins to shift. The air cools rapidly, carrying a faint scent of dust and old smoke. When night falls, Ashwood Camp becomes something else entirely. Darkness settles evenly, broken only by starlight and a pale glow from the horizon. The streets that felt open during the day now feel narrow, their edges blurred by shadow. The silence deepens, no longer calm, but attentive. Shadows begin to move where no light source should allow it. They glide along the empty streets, stretching and contracting as if cast by unseen figures. These shadows do not behave like ordinary darkness. They slide smoothly across the sand, independent of wind or moonlight, passing behind structures and reappearing moments later. Observers often notice these movements from the corners of their vision. When attention shifts directly toward them, the shadows slow or stop, blending seamlessly into the ground. Looking away allows them to resume, drifting with purpose rather than randomness. Alongside the shadows, sound returns to the camp. Soft footsteps echo across the sand, steady and measured. The rhythm suggests familiarity, as though following paths walked countless times before. These footsteps rarely align with visible movement, existing independently of any figure that can be seen. The echoes travel strangely. A sound that seems close may originate far down the street, while a distant step feels uncomfortably near. Turning toward the sound changes nothing. The footsteps continue, matching pace, then pausing when the listener pauses. Those who walk the streets at night often feel accompanied. Not surrounded, but followed at a respectful distance. The sensation is not immediately threatening. Instead, it carries a quiet insistence, as if the presence is acknowledging the figure without engaging directly. Historical accounts describe Ashwood Camp as a temporary settlement built to support seasonal work. Workers came and went, filling the camp with activity during certain months, and leaving it nearly empty during others. Fires burned late into the night, and footsteps were once a constant sound across the sand. When the work ended permanently, the camp was dismantled only partially. Structures remained, tools were removed, and people moved on. The camp was never officially closed, only gradually left behind. Over time, the sand reclaimed the edges, but the streets remained visible. Historical accounts describe Ashwood Camp as a temporary settlement built to support seasonal work. Some believe the nighttime activity reflects this history of repetition. The camp was accustomed to cycles of emptiness and life, silence and motion. Nightfall may simply trigger a memory of when the streets were busiest, when shadows were cast by lantern light and footsteps echoed naturally. Visitors who remain overnight report that the activity follows a pattern. Shadows appear first, then footsteps, then a deepening sense of presence. The sequence repeats without variation, never escalating, never resolving. The camp feels caught in a routine that no longer requires participants. Attempts to interact produce no response. Calling out yields only silence. Shining light toward moving shadows reveals nothing but sand and structure. Recording devices capture ambient noise but rarely isolate the footsteps clearly, as if the sound resists being documented. There are moments when the camp feels almost welcoming. The steady rhythm of movement creates a sense of order, a reminder that the place once functioned as intended. For brief periods, fear gives way to curiosity, even calm. It becomes easy to imagine people returning at dawn, resuming life where it left off. Yet the absence remains undeniable. No voices are heard. No figures fully emerge. The shadows never gain depth or detail. The footsteps never draw close enough to reveal their source. Everything stops just short of becoming real. As the night deepens, activity slowly fades. Shadows thin and stretch until they blend permanently into darkness. Footsteps become less frequent, then stop entirely. The camp returns to stillness, though the air feels charged, as if something has just concluded. By early morning, Ashwood Camp looks unchanged. The sand is smooth, marked only by the footprints of those who walked through. Structures stand as they always have. There is no sign of movement or disturbance. In daylight, the idea of nighttime activity feels distant, almost unreal. Those who leave the camp often carry a lingering impression. The memory of movement without form, sound without source. Some report hearing faint footsteps for hours afterward, fading gradually as distance increases. Officials describe Ashwood Camp as stable and safe, warning only of environmental hazards common to abandoned sites. There are no posted notices about shadows or sounds. The camp remains open to visitors, quiet and unassuming by day. The camp remains open to visitors, quiet and unassuming by day. Yet those who have witnessed the transformation understand the contrast. Ashwood Camp is not simply empty. It is dormant. When night falls, it becomes active in its own restrained way, replaying fragments of motion and sound without explanation. The camp does not appear to seek attention or interaction. It does not trap or threaten. It simply moves when the light is gone, allowing shadows to glide and footsteps to echo across the sand. As if reminding the darkness that it once knew how to live. Widowmaker Village stands in a narrow valley where steep slopes press close on either side, limiting sunlight and trapping sound. The buildings cluster tightly along uneven streets, built from stone and timber meant to endure harsh conditions. The village earned its name through tragedy rather than legend. Historical records describe a place shaped by difficult work and unforgiving terrain. Accidents were common. Collapses, falls, sudden failures of structure and equipment. Over time, deaths accumulated, enough that the settlement became known more for loss than productivity. Families left when they could. Those who remained did so out of necessity, not comfort. Eventually, the village emptied. What remains today is a silent grid of streets lined with abandoned homes and workshops. Roofs sag inward. Windows gape open. Tools lie where they were last used, coated in dust and rust. The ground bears scars from repeated repairs, each one marking an effort to continue despite mounting risk. During the day, Widowmaker Village appears still and heavy. The air feels dense, as if reluctant to move. Sound travels oddly, sometimes carrying far, sometimes fading immediately. Footsteps echo longer than expected, bouncing off stone walls before dissolving into quiet. The sense of being watched often begins here, subtle and persistent. As evening approaches, the village changes. Light drains from the streets unevenly, leaving pockets of darkness between buildings. The valley cools rapidly, and with the drop in temperature comes a shift in atmosphere. Many visitors report feeling tension without a clear source, as if the space itself remembers stress and strain. It is after dusk that the figures appear. They rise slowly along the streets, emerging from shadow rather than arriving from elsewhere. Their forms are tall and indistinct, shaped like people but lacking detail. They do not walk at first. They simply stand, gathering definition against the darkness, as though forming from the air itself. When they begin to move, it is unhurried. They drift forward in small groups or alone, following the lines of the streets. Their movement is smooth, almost gliding, without visible effort. They do not acknowledge observers. They do not turn their heads. They remain focused on paths long memorized. When watched closely, they often fade, dissolving into darkness without sound. Alongside the sightings come the voices. Distant cries echo through the valley, carried faintly on the night air. They are soft and broken, more like fragments of sound than clear calls. Whispers follow, overlapping and indistinct, as though many quiet voices speak at once without forming words. These sounds never seem close. They remain far away, even when the village is otherwise silent. Following them leads nowhere. They drift between streets and buildings, impossible to trace to a single source. The whispers rise and fall, sometimes pausing for long stretches before returning unexpectedly. Researchers have proposed explanations rooted in acoustics. The valley's shape can trap and redirect sound. Wind moving through broken structures may produce tones resembling voices. Temperature changes can carry distant noises from miles away. These factors explain how sound travels, but not why it feels directed, or why it carries emotional weight. Visitors often describe a deep unease. Not fear of attack, but a sense of grief pressing outward from the environment. The cries do not sound panicked. They sound weary. The whispers do not threaten. They seem to recount, repeat, or remember. The figures reinforce this impression. They do not display aggression or urgency. Their presence feels routine, as though repeating actions long embedded in the village's rhythm. Rising. Standing. Moving. Fading. Again and again. Sleep comes unevenly. Dreams are filled with narrow streets and heavy labor. The sound of movement persists even when awake, footsteps echoing just beyond walls, then stopping abruptly. At dawn, exhaustion lingers, not physical, but mental, as if rest was incomplete. Despite the village's reputation, no recent harm has been reported. No one has been injured. No one has vanished. Widowmaker Village does not act upon those who enter. It presents itself, allows observation, and then withdraws. The danger associated with it belongs to the past, not the present. Daylight strips away much of the activity. The cries fall silent. The whispers fade into the natural sounds of wind and distant wildlife. What remains is decay and abandonment, visible and ordinary. Yet the memory of the night lingers, difficult to dismiss. Those who leave often do so quietly. Conversations feel unnecessary. The experience resists casual explanation. The village feels less like a haunted place and more like a record, one written into stone, wood, and air. Widowmaker Village does not seek attention. It does not attempt to frighten or impress. It exists as it always has, shaped by hardship and repetition. The figures that rise along its street seem bound to that history, not trapped by it, but continuing it in a muted, altered form. The cries and whispers do not demand response. They drift through the valley like echoes of effort and loss, reminders of lives shaped by risk and endurance. In this way, the village becomes more than a site of accidents. It becomes a place where the past remains active, not through violence or threat, but through memory that refuses to fully settle. Widowmaker Village stands quietly now, holding its streets, its shadows, and its sounds. Waiting, not for visitors to stay, but for them to listen, briefly, before moving on and leaving the valley to its long, uneasy silence once again. Misty Canyon Village rests along a narrow bend where stone walls rise steeply on both sides. The canyon funnels air downward, carrying cool moisture from higher elevations. Fog arrives without urgency, rolling low across the ground before lifting slowly, filling the space between rock and roof with drifting white layers. From above, the village is difficult to see. Rooflines blend with pale stone. Paths curve naturally with the canyon floor. The settlement appears small, almost tucked away, as though it was never meant to be noticed for long. When fog settles fully, buildings seem to float, disconnected from the earth beneath them. The approach into Misty Canyon Village is quiet. Sound compresses between the canyon walls, dulling footsteps and softening voices. Even movement feels restrained, as if the air itself applies gentle resistance. The fog carries a cool, mineral scent, faintly damp, clinging to clothing and skin. Buildings stand close together, constructed from local stone and wood weathered smooth by time. Doors hang unevenly, some ajar, some sealed shut. Windows reflect fog instead of light, giving the impression of depth where none exists. The village shows no sign of recent use, yet it does not feel neglected. As fog thickens, shapes begin to appear. At first they resemble deeper folds within the mist. Slightly darker areas that shift as the fog moves. With patience, these shapes resolve into figures standing just beyond clear visibility. They remain still, partially obscured, positioned at corners of buildings or along narrow paths. They watch. Their outlines are incomplete, softened by fog that refuses to part fully. Height and form vary subtly, but no defining features emerge. When attention lingers too long, the shapes thin and dissolve, blending seamlessly back into drifting mist. Those walking through the village often feel the sensation before noticing the figures. A brief brush along the arm. A light pressure near the elbow. The touch is cool, precise, and fleeting. It does not resemble wind or fabric. It arrives without sound and fades without trace. Turning reveals empty air. Fog shifts lazily. The canyon walls remain unchanged. Yet the certainty of contact remains, lingering longer than the sensation itself. Some report feeling it again moments later, always gentle, never forceful. Sound behaves strangely within the village. A step echoes softly, then vanishes. A cough seems louder than expected, then abruptly muted. The canyon absorbs and redirects noise, creating the impression that sound belongs more to the space than to the person making it. The figures appear most often near the center of the village, where the canyon narrows further. Here, fog thickens quickly, rising to chest height. Buildings blur at their edges. And paths lose clear direction. The sense of distance becomes unreliable, stretching and contracting without warning. Those who stop moving notice a subtle change. The fog slows. The sensation of touch fades. The figures remain in place, still watching, still silent. There is no pressure to continue, only a quiet awareness of being observed. Historical records suggest Misty Canyon Village once served travelers moving through the canyon. It offered rest and shelter rather than permanence. When routes shifted, the village emptied gradually. People left belongings behind, expecting to return. The canyon reclaimed the space with fog and quiet. Environmental studies explain the persistent mist as a natural result of temperature differences and airflow. Narrow stone walls trap cool air, encouraging condensation. These explanations describe the fog well, but they do not address the figures, or the sensation of touch. As visitors move deeper, the fog grows denser, and the figures appear closer. Still distant, still indistinct, but undeniably present. They seem positioned deliberately, spaced evenly, watching without expression. The canyon feels populated without activity. The sensation of unseen hands becomes more frequent here. A brush against the forearm. A light contact at the shoulder. The touches never linger. They do not guide or restrain. They mark presence, as if acknowledging those who pass through. Despite the unusual experiences, panic is rare. The village does not feel hostile. The atmosphere encourages quiet reflection rather than fear. Many visitors lower their voices instinctively, moving with care, as if respecting an unspoken boundary. Attempts to document the figures have produced little. Photographs show fog and empty streets. Video captures drifting mist without clear form. Audio recordings reveal only ambient canyon sounds. The experiences resist being preserved, existing only in the moment. Those who turn back before reaching the far end describe a gradual easing. The fog thins. The touches stop. The figures fade without announcement. The canyon widens slightly, allowing sound and light to return. Those who continue through to the opposite side experience a different sensation. The figures appear one final time, standing farther back than before, partially hidden by stone and mist. The fog loosens its hold, releasing visitors into clearer air. Looking back from higher ground, Misty Canyon Village appears still and empty. Fog drifts through streets and between buildings, revealing no movement. The canyon walls stand silent, indifferent to observation. Yet those who have walked its paths often remember the experience vividly. The quiet figures watching from within the mist. The cool brush of unseen hands. The feeling of passing through a place that recognizes presence without needing to reveal itself. Misty Canyon Village remains where it has always been, shaped by stone, air, and time. And when the mist is thick enough, the village seems to awaken briefly, allowing shapes to form, touches to pass, and silent watchers to stand once more. Among the drifting white air, Blackroot Camp lies at the edge of a wide desert basin where scrub grass thins and the ground turns to fine sand. By day, the land appears pale and dry, stretching outward beneath an open sky. The camp itself is little more than a clearing marked by old fire rings, weathered posts, and faint paths pressed into the earth. It feels abandoned, yet not forgotten, as if it is waiting for night to return. When the sun sets, the landscape changes quickly. Moonlight reveals something unusual about the sand. What appeared tan and ordinary during daylight darkens into a deep charcoal hue, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. The ground seems heavier underfoot, each step quieter than expected. Campers often pause, unsettled by the way the sand appears almost black, as though shadow has settled permanently into the surface. The air at Blackroot Camp grows still after dusk. Wind moves carefully, low and slow, carrying distant sounds without clear direction. Campfires burn weakly, their glow struggling to push back the surrounding darkness. Many visitors report that artificial light feels insufficient here, as if the night presses inward no matter how bright the flame. It is often during these moments of quiet that figures appear. They emerge at the edges of vision, standing just beyond the reach of firelight. Tall shapes, thin and indistinct, rising briefly from the darkness before dissolving again into the night. They do not approach. They do not retreat. They appear only long enough to be noticed, then vanish as though they were never there at all. Those who witness the figures describe a strange calm rather than fear. The sight feels expected, almost routine, as if the land itself is revealing a pattern rather than an anomaly. Attempts to focus directly on the shapes cause them to fade faster, leaving behind only the black sand and the faint glow of embers. The chanting begins later. It is not loud, nor is it clear. The sound rides the wind in soft pulses, rising and falling with no obvious rhythm. Campers often debate whether the sound is real. Some hear it clearly. Others sense only vibration, a subtle pressure in the air that makes the skin prickle. Recording devices rarely capture anything unusual, producing only faint static or wind noise where listeners insist the chanting was present. Historical information about Blackroot Camp is sparse. The area does not appear prominently in official records, though old survey maps mark the basin with vague notations. Oral histories from nearby regions speak of gatherings held long before modern camps existed, when the desert floor was used for rituals tied to season and survival. The name blackroot is believed to come from hardy plants that grow beneath the sand. Their roots dark and thick, capable of surviving extreme conditions. Some believe the chanting is tied to these roots, carried upward through the ground when night cools the surface. Others suggest the sound is a natural phenomenon, created by shifting temperatures and wind moving through unseen channels beneath the sand. Neither explanation fully accounts for the consistency of the experience or the timing of the figures that appear alongside it. One visitor described waking in the middle of the night to find the camp completely silent. The fire had burned down to embers, and the moon hung low over the basin. As his eyes adjusted, he noticed several figures standing at the far edge of the clearing, evenly spaced, facing inward. They remained still for several seconds before fading simultaneously, leaving behind an overwhelming sense of stillness. Moments later, the chanting resumed, softer than before. Another account tells of a small group who heard the chanting grow stronger as clouds passed over the moon. The sand darkened further, blending seamlessly with the sky. Shadows seemed to rise from the ground itself, stretching upward before flattening again. None of the group felt threatened, yet all agreed to leave at first light, driven by an unspoken agreement that staying longer would invite something they did not understand. Despite these stories, Blackroot Camp does not feel hostile. The atmosphere is heavy, but not aggressive. The land does not chase visitors away. It observes them, measuring presence and intention. Those who remain calm and respectful often report uneventful nights, punctuated only by distant sound and fleeting movement. Sleep at Blackroot Camp is described as deep but unsettled. Dreams feel vivid, grounded in sensation rather than imagery. Many dream of standing barefoot on dark sand, listening rather than speaking. Waking brings clarity mixed with a sense of having participated in something without knowing its purpose. By dawn, the desert resets. The air warms. The camp appears ordinary once more, empty and quiet beneath the rising sun. Footprints left in the sand remain visible, grounding the experience in reality. Relief at returning to daylight. Curiosity about what they witnessed. Others never come back, satisfied with having experienced the place once. Figures rise briefly from the edge of sight. Presence and absence. It is not a place of danger, but of reminder. That beneath the surface of familiar ground, something older listens. That the night can reveal patterns not meant to be followed, only witnessed. And that some camps do not belong fully to the day, waiting instead for darkness to return and the desert to speak again. Hollowbrook Village lies tucked within a shallow valley where trees grow thick and close, their branches arching over narrow paths like a sheltering canopy. At the heart of the settlement, a creek winds steadily through stone-lined banks, its water clear and softly moving. By day, the village appears calm and almost inviting, shaped by the gentle sound of flowing water and the stillness of abandoned homes. The buildings stand in careful rows along the creek, constructed from timber and stone gathered long ago. Roofs sag but remain intact. Windows are empty, their frames worn smooth by years of weather. Wooden bridges cross the water at regular intervals, connecting both sides of the village and guiding foot traffic that no longer exists. During daylight hours, Hollowbrook feels quiet but complete. The creek reflects sunlight in broken patterns. And moss clings to the stones near the waterline. The bridges creak faintly under shifting temperature. A natural sound easily dismissed. Visitors often linger here. Drawn by the peaceful setting. And the sense of balance between water and land. As the sun lowers, shadows stretch along the creek banks. Light filters through the trees in narrow bands, and the water darkens to a slow, reflective ribbon. The village begins to feel smaller, more enclosed. Sound carries differently, each footstep softened by damp ground and layered leaves. It is along the creek that the first unusual movements are often noticed. Figures appear near the water, walking slowly along the banks. They are visible only briefly, seen between tree trunks or reflected faintly in the surface of the creek. Their forms are human in outline, upright and deliberate, yet lacking detail. These figures do not disturb the water as they move. The surface remains smooth, unbroken by ripples or splashes. When attention is focused directly on them, they fade or slip behind natural cover, leaving the impression that they were never fully present to begin with. As evening deepens, the figures become more frequent. They seem to follow the curves of the creek, pausing near bends where the water slows and widens. Their movement is unhurried, consistent, as if following a familiar route. No faces can be seen, no clothing distinguished, only the suggestion of people walking where people once lived. The bridges play a central role in the experiences reported at Hollowbrook. As night approaches, visitors hear footsteps crossing the wooden planks, steady and measured. The sound is unmistakable, wood responding to weight and motion. Yet when the bridges are checked, they stand empty, unmoving above the creek. These footsteps often occur when no wind is present. Leaves remain still, and water flows undisturbed. The sound begins at one end of a bridge and travels to the other, then stops. Moments later, it may repeat on a different crossing, following no predictable pattern. Those standing near the creek at night often feel watched from both sides. The banks seem occupied, even when empty. The sound of footsteps creates the impression of movement through the village, connecting spaces that appear abandoned. The creek reflects fragments of motion that vanish when examined too closely. Historical records describe Hollowbrook Village as a small but active community built around the waterway. The creek provided drinking water, powered small mills, and served as a gathering place. Bridges were essential, linking homes, workshops, and communal areas. Life here followed the rhythm of the water. When the village was eventually abandoned, the creek remained unchanged. It continued to flow, marking the same paths through stone and soil. Buildings fell quiet, but the infrastructure stayed in place. Over time, nature softened the edges. Yet the layout endured. Some believe the activity at Hollowbrook reflects this strong connection to routine. The figures along the banks move as if completing daily walks. The footsteps across bridges echo patterns repeated countless times when the village was alive. The water, constant and observant, ties these movements together. Visitors often describe a feeling of calm mixed with unease. The presence does not feel aggressive or threatening. Instead, it feels absorbed in its own purpose, indifferent to observation. The village seems to function independently, continuing something that no longer requires participants. Attempts to capture the figures or sounds rarely succeed. Photographs show empty banks. Recordings pick up water and ambient noise, but footsteps often register only faintly, if at all. The experiences resist documentation, existing primarily in direct perception. Spending extended time near the creek can feel disorienting. The steady flow masks subtle sounds, making it difficult to tell what is real and what is not. Reflections shift constantly, and movement at the edge of vision becomes easy to misinterpret. Yet many insist the figures feel distinct from illusion. At certain moments, multiple bridges seem active at once. Footsteps echo from different directions, overlapping briefly before falling silent. The effect creates a sense of coordinated movement, as if the village is briefly populated again, just beyond visibility. As night progresses, the activity slowly diminishes. Figures along the banks appear less often. Footsteps become spaced farther apart. The creek remains unchanged, its sound steady and grounding. By the time darkness begins to thin toward morning, the village returns to near stillness. At dawn, Hollowbrook looks exactly as it did the day before. The banks show no new marks. The creek flows quietly through the center, reflecting pale light. Any memory of figures and footsteps feels distant, difficult to reconcile with the calm scene. Those who leave the village often report lingering impressions. The sound of water seems louder elsewhere. Reflections catch attention more easily. The experience stays subtle, more atmospheric than intrusive. Officials describe Hollowbrook Village as structurally fragile but otherwise uneventful. There are no posted warnings about sounds or sightings, only guidance about safety near water and aging buildings. The village remains accessible, its story largely untold. Yet those who have stood beside the creek at night understand the quiet complexity of the place. Hollowbrook does not feel abandoned in the usual sense. It feels inhabited by movement rather than presence, by routine rather than form. The creek continues to run through the settlement, unchanged and persistent. Along its banks, figures still move when light is low. Across its bridges, footsteps still echo when no one walks. Hollowbrook Village remains suspended between what it was and what it appears to be. Held together by water, wood, and the memory of passing lives. Blood Willow Village lies along a slow, winding river, where the land stays damp year-round and the air carries a constant hush. Willow trees line every street, their long branches trailing toward the ground like curtains that never fully lift. Roots rise above the soil in thick, tangled networks, cracking pavement and stone as if the village was built around the trees rather than the other way around. The willows dominate everything here. Their trunks bend and twist, darkened by moisture and age. Leaves whisper constantly, even when the wind is barely present. Sunlight filters through them unevenly, casting soft, shifting patterns across abandoned homes and narrow roads. The village feels sheltered, enclosed, and quietly watched. Blood Willow Village was once a riverside settlement sustained by fishing, trade, and fertile land. Houses were built close together, tucked beneath the trees for shade and protection from seasonal floods. Over time, the river shifted, trade slowed, and residents gradually moved on. The willows remained, growing thicker and heavier as the village emptied. During the day, the streets feel calm but uneasy. Water pools in low places. Moss spreads across walls and steps. The roots creep farther each year, lifting stones and swallowing fences. Footsteps sound muted, softened by damp earth and fallen leaves. Even voices seem restrained, as if the air absorbs sound before it can travel far. As evening approaches, the village changes. Light dims quickly beneath the willow canopy. The air cools, carrying the scent of wet bark and river water. It is during these hours that movement is first noticed. Figures crouch among the roots. They remain low to the ground, partially hidden by hanging branches and thick growth. Their shapes are small and indistinct, blending into shadow and soil. They do not rise fully. They stay close to the earth, as if anchored there, watching from beneath the willows. They do not approach. They remain still when observed directly, yet seem to shift position when attention drifts away. A shape seen near one tree later appears beneath another. The movement is subtle, slow, and deliberate. There is no sound of footsteps or rustling leaves to accompany it. Witnesses describe a strange sense of familiarity. The figures feel known rather than threatening. Their posture suggests waiting or listening, not hiding. They crouch with patience, as if the roots themselves offer comfort and concealment. Whispers drift through the streets, low and soft, blending with the rustle of leaves. Sometimes they sound like quiet remarks shared between people standing nearby. It is faint and brief, more breath than voice, carrying a lightness that contrasts with the heavy air. The laughter never grows loud. It never feels mocking or sharp. It sounds distant yet intimate, as if carried directly through the branches. As if carried directly through the branches. Under the willows, the air feels thicker, charged with presence. Standing still there heightens awareness. Every movement feels noticed. Visitors often describe the sensation of being observed from below, from within the roots themselves. Despite this, fear is uncommon. Most report curiosity mixed with unease, not alarm. The village does not feel hostile. Willow branches create unique acoustics. Wind passing through dense leaves can produce tones resembling voices. The river carries sound unpredictably at night. Small animals moving through roots can create the illusion of shifting forms. Yet these explanations fail to satisfy those who have spent extended time in the village. The timing of the sounds feels intentional. The figures appear only after dusk. The sense of presence grows stronger beneath specific trees, not randomly. The experiences repeat with consistency. Some believe the willows hold memory. That their roots, grown deep into soil shaped by generations, retain traces of human activity. Laughter shared beneath their shade. Conversations held during long evenings. Quiet moments of rest against their trunks. Over time, these impressions may have settled into the environment itself. Others suggest the village exists in a state of gentle overlap. Not fully past, not fully present. Those who stay overnight often experience vivid dreams. Dreams of walking beneath low branches. Of sitting quietly near the river. Of listening to others speak without seeing their faces. Upon waking, many feel rested yet contemplative, as if the sleep carried meaning without clarity. At dawn, Blood Willow Village grows quiet again. The figures vanish with the retreating shadows. The whispers dissolve into birdsong and moving water. The laughter fades entirely. Sunlight returns, filtered gently through green leaves. The village appears unchanged. Roots remain tangled. Homes remain empty. The river continues its slow course. Yet those who leave often carry a lingering sensation, as though part of the village walked with them for a time before letting go. Blood Willow Village does not demand belief. It does not force attention or provoke fear. It offers subtle presence, quiet sound, and gentle movement. It invites observation rather than explanation. In the end, it stands as a place shaped by connection. Between people and land. Between roots and memory. Between silence and sound. Beneath the willows, the village continues to breathe softly, whispering and laughing just enough to remind visitors that some places never fully forget the lives that once gathered beneath their shade. Phantom Creek Village lies in a shallow valley where water once flowed steadily through smooth stone channels. The creek still runs, narrow and quiet, reflecting the sky by day. And swallowing light by night. During daylight hours, the village appears abandoned but intact. Paths curve gently between low buildings constructed of wood and stone. Roofs remain in place. Doorways stand open. The air carries the scent of damp earth and slow water. And the entire settlement feels suspended, as if waiting for something to resume. As evening approaches, the atmosphere begins to change. The first signs appear just after dusk, when natural light fades unevenly across the valley. Lanterns begin to glow along the paths. One by one, soft points of amber light emerge, hovering at a familiar height, spaced evenly as if carried by unseen hands. They sway gently, responding to a breeze that does not reach the skin. The lanterns simply appear, illuminating paths that lead nowhere specific, outlining routes through the village that have not been walked in years. Visitors watching from a distance often assume someone else has arrived. The lights suggest preparation, guidance, welcome. But closer inspection reveals no movement beyond the lanterns themselves. They drift slightly, pause, then continue, as if following routines remembered rather than chosen. As darkness deepens, the ground near the creek begins to change. Figures rise slowly from the earth, emerging without sound. They do not break the surface or disturb the soil. They seem to assemble themselves from shadow and reflection, forming upright shapes that resemble people standing at rest. Their ascent is gradual, unhurried, as if responding to a signal carried by night itself. These figures remain close to the creek at first, spaced along its banks, facing inward toward the water. They do not interact. They do not turn their heads. They simply stand, faintly outlined by lantern light and starlight, present without motion. Shadows behave differently once the figures appear. Cast shadows stretch across the ground, but some detach from their sources. They slide along paths, cross walls, and drift between buildings independent of any object. A lantern may cast one shadow that behaves normally, while another peels away, moving in a different direction entirely. The effect is subtle at first. A shadow that lingers longer than expected. One that shifts when nothing else moves. Over time, the independence becomes undeniable. Shadows pass one another. They gather briefly, then separate. Tracing routes that do not align with light. Sound remains muted throughout Phantom Creek Village at night. Water murmurs softly, but does not echo. Footsteps feel intrusive, too loud for the space, even when taken carefully. The lanterns emit no noise. The figures rising from the ground remain silent. Those who walk among the paths often report a sensation of alignment, as if stepping into a pattern already in progress. The lanterns illuminate just enough to guide movement, but never enough to reveal detail. The figures remain at a respectful distance. The shadows move freely, unconcerned with observation. Despite the unsettling visuals, fear does not arrive suddenly. The atmosphere feels controlled, deliberate. Nothing rushes. Nothing lunges. The village behaved like a performance continuing regardless of audience. Historical records suggest Phantom Creek Village once relied heavily on evening activity. The creek powered small operations. Lanterns guided workers home after dark. Night held importance here, shaping daily rhythm. When the village was abandoned, these routines ended abruptly. Some believe the nightly phenomena reflect residual patterns, habits imprinted deeply enough to persist. Lanterns lighting familiar paths. Figures assembling where people once gathered. Shadows reenacting movement long after bodies are gone. As midnight approaches, activity reaches its peak. More figures rise along the creek and near building foundations. They remain partially formed, never fully solid, their edges blending with darkness. Lanterns cluster briefly at intersections, then drift apart again. Shadows move with greater confidence, crossing open ground without hesitation. Visitors standing still notice a subtle sensation of being included. Not addressed. Not acknowledged directly. Simply allowed to exist within the motion. The village does not react to presence. It accommodates it. Attempts to document the phenomena have yielded limited results. Photographs capture lantern light without source. Video records shadow movement without explanation. Audio remains largely unchanged, offering no clues. Instruments detect no abnormal energy or temperature shifts. As the night begins to thin toward early morning, changes occur gradually. Figures sink back into the ground as slowly as they rose. Lanterns dim, then vanish one by one, leaving paths unlit and undefined. Shadows reattach to their sources, behaving normally once more. By dawn, Phantom Creek Village appears as it did before. The village seems satisfied, its routines fulfilled. Nothing lingers beyond memory and impression. Visitors come seeking quiet landscapes and forgotten places. Most leave before nightfall. But those who remain after dark witness something else entirely. Lanterns lighting paths without hands to carry them. Figures rising silently from the ground. Shadows moving with their own intent. And when morning comes, the village returns to stillness, holding its secrets beneath the surface, waiting patiently for night to fall again. Darkwater Camp lies beyond the last maintained road, where dry land gives way to low dunes and narrow streets carved into sand and packed earth. From above, the settlement appears loosely organized, cabins clustered around winding alleys that lead nowhere directly. The name Darkwater comes from a shallow basin nearby that once collected rain, though it has remained empty for as long as anyone remembers. Even without water, the ground here never fully dries, holding a coolness that seeps upward after sunset. By day, Darkwater Camp feels abandoned but intact. Cabins stand upright, doors closed but unbarred. Lantern hooks remain fixed beside entrances, their metal worn smooth by time. The sand between structures appears ordinary, pale and granular, shifting slightly underfoot with each step. There is little sound beyond distant wind and the faint creak of wood settling in the heat. As evening approaches, the camp begins to change. Light fades unevenly, shadows stretching across the alleys before the sun fully lowers. The air cools rapidly, and sound carries in unusual ways. Footsteps echo farther than expected, then vanish entirely. The sand darkens, absorbing what little light remains, making depth difficult to judge. Visitors often report the sensation of standing within a place that is slowly waking. Lanterns are the first sign. Soft glows appear among the cabins, hovering just above ground level or drifting gently between doorways. No hands hold them. No flame flickers within. The light is steady and muted, illuminating narrow paths while leaving surrounding areas in shadow. The lanterns move calmly, never colliding, never rushing, as if following routes long memorized. Soon after, figures begin to rise along the streets. They emerge gradually from the darkness, pale shapes forming where the alleys narrow. At first they resemble upright shadows, but as they become clearer, their stillness sets them apart. They stand silently, facing the paths, heads slightly lowered, features indistinct yet unmistakably human in form. They do not step forward. They do not retreat. They simply appear, occupying space without sound. Those who encounter the figures often feel a tightening in the chest, paired with an odd familiarity. The fear is present, but subdued, wrapped in a sense that resistance would be meaningless. Looking directly at the figures causes them to blur, their outlines dissolving softly before reforming moments later elsewhere. Sound returns to Darkwater Camp in fragments. Visitors hear footsteps behind them, measured and deliberate, matching their pace exactly. When they stop, the sound continues for 1 or 2 steps, then fades. Whispers travel along the alleys, indistinct and layered, as though many voices are speaking just beyond understanding. Occasionally, quiet laughter drifts through the air, distant and gentle, never sharp or mocking, yet deeply unsettling in its calmness. No single source can be identified. Sounds move freely, passing from one alley to the next, sometimes circling back. The camp feels occupied, not crowded, but aware. Attempts to pinpoint direction often result in disorientation, paths curving subtly until familiar landmarks disappear. One of the most unsettling sensations reported involves the ground itself. Visitors describe feeling the sand shift beneath their feet, not collapsing, but guiding. Each step seems to settle into place more firmly than expected, angled slightly toward deeper sections of the camp. Turning back feels possible, yet difficult, as if the ground resists sudden changes in direction. Those who continue forward often do so without realizing how far they have gone. Historical references to Darkwater Camp are inconsistent. Some records describe it as a temporary settlement, others as a permanent village. There is no clear account of disaster or evacuation. Instead, documentation fades gradually, as though interest in the place simply stopped rather than ended. Local belief suggests Darkwater Camp never truly emptied. According to these stories, routine remained after people left. Paths remembered footsteps. Lanterns remembered evenings. The village learned to repeat itself, using sound and movement to maintain familiarity. Visitors are not seen as intruders, but as participants, briefly woven into the pattern. Those who stay overnight often report fragmented sleep. Dreams blend with waking moments. Some wake to see lantern light passing beneath their doors. Others hear movement just outside, the soft crunch of sand and the quiet murmur of voices. Stepping outside reveals empty alleys and drifting light, the source always just beyond reach. One visitor described walking through the camp late at night, following a lantern that hovered steadily ahead. Figures lined the street on both sides, pale and motionless. As the visitor passed, faint laughter rippled through the air, not directed, not cruel, simply present. The sand beneath felt firm and warm, guiding each step forward until the lantern finally dimmed and vanished. Another account tells of a pair who attempted to leave together. The alleys shifted subtly, turning them in slow arcs that brought them deeper instead of outward. Only after sitting quietly and waiting did the sounds fade and the paths return to their original alignment. Darkwater Camp does not pursue those who leave. It does not block exits permanently. It seems to respond to urgency and fear, tightening its hold when resisted. Loosening when approached calmly. Those who remain still, who listen without reacting, often find the experience passing more gently. By morning, the camp resets. Lanterns disappear. Figures dissolve into shadow. Sound returns to normal. The sand lightens, showing footprints clearly once more, tracing paths taken during the night. Cabins stand silent and ordinary, offering no evidence of what unfolded hours earlier. Relief mixes with a strange sense of connection. The awareness of footsteps that were not their own. Darkwater Camp is often described as the most haunted of all, not because of danger, but because of completeness. Light, sound, movement, and memory work together seamlessly. It builds atmosphere slowly, inviting attention rather than demanding it. Those who pass through carry the experience with them long after leaving. Not as trauma, but as understanding. That some places remember how to be lived in. That when night falls, villages like Darkwater do not sleep. They listen. They move. And for a short time, they welcome footsteps back into their streets. Guiding them gently through sand and shadow, deeper into the quiet rhythm they have never forgotten. Thank you, my dear friend, for walking with me tonight through the haunted desert ghost villages of Nevada. These sands and ruins are more than empty land. They are alive with memories, shadows, and spirits that refuse to rest. If you ever wander through a desert ghost village at night, and fog drifts low, or shadows move along the streets, or lanterns appear floating in the sand, remember this. Not every shadow is harmless. Not every alley is safe. And not every figure belongs to the world of the living. Walk carefully. Keep your lanterns close. And may the spirits of the desert leave you to step safely back to the living world until our next haunted journey, my dear friend.